You're watching the Digital Native Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Anderson. Today we have Janice Little. Janice is the VP of Engineering at SheerID. Janice, thanks for joining.
Sure. Hi, everybody, and thanks for having me.
So Janice, I'm really excited to feature you guys. I think SheerID is one of those companies that everyone needs to know about, especially here in Portland. You're doing some really exciting things. You raised $64 million in November, which is exciting for both Portland and Eugene. To get us started, I would love to hear more about your background, how you got into technology and what kind of companies you've worked for.
Sure. So I grew up in Davis, California. So I grew up in a really academic setting. A lot of exposure to technology. My elementary school classmates are all leaders at technology orgs currently. My father had his own website. My brother and I gamed all night playing Agent USA on Commodore 64. And at the time I just thought like nerds, and I didn't have a ton of interest in terms of career. And then in 1998, I was offered a full ride tennis scholarship to the University of Oregon and played on the team there and majored in biology. And through some of my bioinformatics work, I got really interested in it and started to love computers.
No, I had no idea you were a tennis player. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, we should play sometime.
Oh, you would destroy me. It's a common theme, I think, with a lot of engineering leaders getting started with gaming and playing and building games. Something I'm passionate about too. Speaking of that, I mean, how did you start and kind of get more passionate about technology, and then specific with engineering? How did you start to, I guess, learn about more of that kind of stuff and get interested?
Right. And, the roles I went into, I've done a ton of roles. So, QA engineering manager, managing direct line, and then also other managers and into director positions. And, at every stage, really, I just love exchanging ideas about how to make products and teams more successful, more effective. I want the process to feel smooth like butter, and, just being really passionate about that. I'm sure my competitive streak probably helps with that. I was born caffeinated. So, just really that self-satisfaction and knowing that you're trying to take something all the way and do your best, kind of provides the fuel in the startup world. Having a mission and a sense of urgency is just so fun.
And a lot of your career has been down in Eugene and in the tech scene there. I give my friends a hard time down there a lot because a lot of folks call it the Silicon Shire, which I think is just an incredible name. But what's unique about the Eugene tech scene? What are some of the cool things happening down there?
Yeah, it's grown so much in the past couple of years. When I renewed my job search to find SheerID, I was just blown away by, there are over 500 tech companies in Lane County right now. Average wage is about $70,000. Given the cost of living here, it's an amazing lifestyle. Tech has really influenced the shape of downtown Eugene as well. We're now a Mozilla gigabit city. We added ride sharing like Uber and Lyft, which we didn't have previously. And for me, when Symantec left last year, it was our largest tech employer. And since we've seen growth even from the time that they left, to me, that was kind of a sign that we've reached this critical mass and that we have a sustainable, tech community. And that was really exciting, actually. We have a ton of hidden gems in Eugene. We like to say that, larger cities attract people that want to participate in the culture. Smaller cities, like Eugene, attract people who want to create it. So you see a lot of relocation, from the Bay Area. One of the funny things to me is they call it like returning salmon, where they will actually go down to the Bay Area, do a couple years and come back to Eugene.
Yeah, I think what's so cool about this shift and, the growth in places like Bend and Eugene and cities in Montana is that for the same amount of money, an investor can start a company get an MVP of a product. And if they were to do that in San Francisco, they'd get office space for the same amount of money.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Joe Sventek over at the University of Oregon has really upped the quality of their program there. So many great graduates that are collaborative, selfless, team oriented, very Eugene way of being, graduating from there with top quality skills. So that's exciting.
So moving more to SheerID, online, you guys market yourself as an identity marketing platform. Can you tell a little bit more about what the company does and how you're helping your customers?
Absolutely. So at our core, we connect brands to consumer tribes. And that means connecting them to students and military, first responders, educators, nonprofits, small businesses, and most recently with the COVID crisis happening, doctors and nurses, and that allowing them to have authoritative verification. So extremely personalized, gated offers for underserved, hard to reach populations.
And I know there's some big brands that you guys have as customers. How do they typically first come to SheerID? I mean, what are some of the compelling themes or maybe problems they're facing?
Yeah, so that's kind of twofold. For us, it's really the balance of fraud versus friction, right? So we see them, really want to be generous, right? Like, we talked about, the Lowe's example where, it's 10% off. It's a pretty big give to military, right? And they can do that seamlessly online and, in stores, and, balancing that with making sure that someone really is in the military and, gating that against fraudsters, which is a constant, cat and mouse game for us. Data privacy is really important to us as well. Just in terms of, a consumer sort of raising their hand and saying, I'd like to do this, and really creating that sort of, equal value, very transparent value exchange of data. So
and I like, the way you guys talk about tribes, and it just makes me think of, when you get an offer and it's unique and it's, tailored to me and makes me feel special, I'm a lot more likely to take advantage of it, and it's such a smart approach to marketing. And I think really differentiates what you guys are doing.
Absolutely. It definitely drives lower acquisition costs for our customers. So super exciting. Yeah.
What else for you guys is unique about the product and kind of creates this competitive advantage for you guys?
So definitely, the things we said. I think another really big piece is the 9,000 authoritative data sources, right? So, having these, often exclusive data sources to be able to verify that the special offer is going to the right people. It demonstrates the, kind of the offer integrity. And again, that very clear value exchange. There are a lot of suspect data surveillance techniques out there. SheerID doesn't sell information. We don't sell it. We don't share it. It's directly, it's owned by the brand. It's owned by the consumer. We're just a broker for that exchange, and then we purge it. So people really love that, I guess.
Yeah. And then last question, you and I were talking a little bit about culture during this time. I mean, I think SheerID has a great leadership team, a great culture. Can you speak to that and how you facilitate a good culture within a startup?
Absolutely. That's a lot, right? That's a really big question. In March, I was super proud. We were awarded, I think it was like number 12 in the Forbes list of best companies to work for. And that was across all industries for startup, and that was just absolutely an amazing accomplishment in terms of, building the business, building the culture. The story that I really like to tell is my own personal story joining SheerID. Jake, I went to go talk to Jake. I was ready for a new adventure, and I had just had a baby, right? Like literally 3 months ago, and I said, I'm ready for something, but I just don't know if I can do this. And he was just like, get in here, just you don't have twins, and Jake has twins, right? So, it was just the most. I mean, it was funny, it was nurturing, and it was so encouraging, right? So to me, that kind of story. A lot of people talk about how to build culture, how to build diversity, how to create these things in an organization. But if the people who start it, that's just normal for them, then I think it solves a lot of challenges.
Yeah, no, that's great. So want to shift the conversation a little bit more to the technology and specifically public cloud. I think there's a lot of folks right now who we were talking earlier. It's hard to remember a time 10 years ago when we didn't have access to a lot of the things we do now, and where building a product looked very different. And I think there's a couple worlds that exist. Some of the larger companies are still building things like everyone else was 5 years ago. So walk us through, I guess, kind of your experience. How were you first? You guys currently are building with another public cloud, but how were you first introduced to kind of cloud technology in general? Where were you skeptical, and kind of what have you learned as part of this journey?
Yeah, I was joking that it's hard to think of a time when cloud didn't exist, in our current world. But for me, I was in custom consulting at the time, and in terms of pattern recognition, and in terms of budget, and there just seemed to be a pattern emerging, right, of people who are really willing to invest time in their infrastructure, and get it right, versus like, oh, I'm fine with where I'm hosted. I don't want to do that, right? So I think just in terms of the doors it opened up into iterating, what my passion is, right? Iterating faster, in deployment, fix new features, and then add on top of that the ease of configuration and the variety. That was all in.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think everyone's realizing right now, depending on the industry that you're in, how important it is to be able to scale up and down. But you spoke to some of the innovation and what it allows you to do. And I think that's what a lot of people miss when they look at the cloud, is it's really an innovation play.
Yeah, absolutely. And just allows us to spend time on innovating, in the industry that we're in, right, in our core competencies.
So in your opinion, what are some of the top challenges for tech and engineering leaders right now? I mean, maybe not specific to COVID-19, but just in general, what do you think are some of the big challenges?
So I've thought about this quite a bit, and I really strongly feel that the top challenges are still the classic ones. How to get it, the right data to the right people at the right moment, and we see things like data science, born out of these very cross-functional collaborations, and technology workers are only going to be more valuable to businesses as in the years ahead, as the combinations of skill set keep doubling down, right? Like in terms of cloud, open source, mobile, big data, security. Like I'd like a developer who knows all of those things, So I think those will continue to be the challenges. Of course, fraud and security, multi-cloud vendor lock-in will continue to be a thing. In terms of like interesting problems, or you mentioned not COVID, but I'll mention one anyway. I'm really interested to see sort of what technology leaps come down because of the crisis. It'll just be really interesting to see what skip technologies and what sort of spiritual revolution comes out of being at home, being remote, and these things.
Yeah, there was a lot of incredible companies that came out of the last recession that, again, it's hard to imagine life without Uber. It's hard to imagine life with a lot of these, companies that had come from that time. So next question, any favorite products that you have experience with in the cloud, or any favorite technologies that you guys have started using in the last few years?
For sure. So for us, the way our platform works is that if for any reason we can't authoritatively verify someone from one of our data sources, the consumer has an opportunity to upload a document to prove the verification. So we use a number of AI computer vision tools that have been, really effective and very core to our business. And Cloud Vision, AI, document understanding AI have been really critical to us to sort of pre-process those documents before they go to a verification specialist, before they go to a human. So, super essential in, our most important initiative, which is customer service, right? Helping customers get verified more quickly and accurately. In the checkout experience.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think that technology there has come so far in the last 2 years. That's a really big misconception we hear is, hey, a lot that stuff just isn't here yet. Depending on the use case, a lot of times it is.
Absolutely, yeah.
So have you been involved? My day-to-day, we're doing a lot of infrastructure migrations. Have you been personally involved in anything on-prem to cloud, cloud to cloud? Would love to hear a little bit more about kind of the trigger that caused the move and what the process was like.
Yeah, definitely not on-prem to cloud. We've always, I'm sorry.
No, it's all good.
Okay, hold on. Let me see if
I can edit it out.
Sorry. So we haven't had, fortunately, we started in the cloud, so we haven't had to migrate from on-prem to cloud. That seems difficult. We are living, in our bones, the experience of moving applications into Docker and Kubernetes. So that's an active effort right now at SheerID, and something, especially with the new funding, we felt like right now was the time to invest in that move. And, of course, our reasons are, the classics, environment parity and improving reliability. But as a manager, I tend to focus more on the cultural shift, that we are trying to create. And, that's a lot of different things, retention, recruiting, onboarding. We really want to be able to give the best in class, both to our engineers and to our customers as we grow really quickly.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
So last few questions I have, shifting it more personal. You and I have talked about just like some of the challenges over the last couple months. I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. You have young kids as well. What has the time been like for you? Anything in particular that's gotten you through, or things that have helped?
Yeah, I don't even know where to start really, because it is a whole different world. And definitely, focusing on something that's not yourself feels so good, right? That there's so much intrinsic value in that. You get so focused on, in your business, even in your team, like shifting the focus to the community, especially with SheerID's mission, right? To being saying thank you to nurses and doctors, and trying to help our teachers, our elementary school teachers, move through the transition to technology. So that's been really beneficial. For a management team, one of the things that we're talking about a lot right now is the difference between 6 weeks in quarantine and 6 weeks from now, because I think there's a really big difference in sort of the sense of isolation, and it's only going to grow. So again, I think we'll see that sort of spiritual evolution of us all really appreciating, the humanity of our lives a little bit more. Yeah,
it's been amazing. I mean, my daughter's 6, and she was so excited when she found out she didn't have school, and I don't think she understood that she wouldn't get school at all for the rest of the year. And so, it's crazy how different it looks now.
Yeah. And it's hard to have those conversations, the right level of honesty with your kids. And it's definitely impacting every aspect of our lives.
There is a book out by it's called A Kid's Book About COVID-19. I read came out of Portland. That
Okay.
was a really cool way for me to kind of share with my daughter, hey, here's what this is, and explain it to a 5 or 6 year old.
Right.
So for you, one of my favorite questions to ask, and probably because I failed so much, where have you failed in your career, and what did you learn from the experience?
So there's so much to choose from here, Ryan. I don't even know where to start, but I think probably the one I like to share the most is really about I think is really about the imposter syndrome sort of that we all experience. And if you've and I've experienced it from way back in college when I thought, oh, that's maybe a career I could get into, all the way through 2 minutes before this phone call. Like, why does Ryan want to talk to me, right? And I think that's it's really common. And I think that although I've sort of employed the classic, get a good network and you're not alone, and those kind of things. I think the biggest takeaway for me has definitely been, twofold. And I wish I knew this when I was 20, number one, like write down the list of things that the growth opportunities that you never want to be stopped by it. I think, that's a very practical action that everybody can take. And then I think the second one is just really gaining a deeper understanding. And, after 20 years, I've just experienced it. But, the economics behind diversity and how powerful that really is, more than gender. Like, how do we seek diverse ideas, understand each other? How does that lead to the right talent pool? How does that lead to things like international expansion and languages and like really effective economic empathy with your consumers to thrive globally. And then that sort of comes back right around into the culture, and all of a sudden you have more productive teams. So just for anybody who feels a little bit on the fringe, or maybe not a classic computer science background, I always ask them to really internalize that.
I love what you spoke to about, imposter syndrome and kind of facing that. I mean, for me, it's something I deal with, obviously. Our team, we talk about it a lot internally at Google, and just some of the strategies to and the mindset you need to take, and surrounding yourself with that foundation and that network around you. I think it's great. And around that, I mean, what's something that you would recommend to engineers earlier in their career in terms of career advice, maybe folks just out of school or earlier in their engineering career?
Right. So, it's all the classic things, networking and, having a broad network and, a deep one as well that you can practice with. But I think the right advice for this moment is probably doubling down on the empathy piece, knowing that, whoever hires you is going to have to onboard you remotely. And that means, and that goes for really anybody, trying to get a job right now. So to me, that means having that one-page resume, right? Not, having some empathy for your audience and preparing for the test questions to show that you're not going to get stuck, right? Your ego is going to be your amigo, and you're going to ask questions and get curious and not get blocked, right? So to me, those are kind of the big things for this moment.
I'm going to write that down. Your ego is your amigo.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, one of the things that you talked about there, that struck a chord with me is I was always told out of school, go find a mentor. Like, you need to find a mentor. And I was like, how do you, and I still don't really know how to do that. What I found is, taking advantage of, hey, if I want to learn the skill, like if I want to learn engineering, like go get an engineering job, and then find the best people on your team and emulate them. I mean, get to know them, learn from them, like soak up the knowledge that you have kind of within your, your realm and your world. And, rather than just pinging someone on LinkedIn and being like, hey, can you be my mentor? I mean, that doesn't typically work.
Yeah. It's, well, I I think I solved that problem. I use a service called Play-Doh. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it, but
Never.
it's an international service, and they hook you up with engineering mentors and mentees, and it's all for engineering managers. It's absolutely amazing, and so I would highly recommend that to everybody. And it seems, the only difference between mentors and mentees is that the mentee gets to pick the topic, right? So there's a lot of high quality people playing both roles in that company.
How cool. Yeah, I'll share the link, Play-Doh.
Yeah.
The last couple questions I have, and then we'll get to a couple quarantine questions. What's something that folks might not know about you outside of work?
Yeah, I mean, I love being a mom. I love scuba diving in the Northwest. Super fun. Pacific giant octopus is like my favorite animal. Somewhat related to work, I have a real passion for digital literacy and career education, specifically the K through 12 and diversity gap that we see just, prevalent, right? This is a very interesting time. Will lead into COVID-19 that's for learning, teacher education as well as student. And I serve on a couple of regional and statewide computer science advisory boards doing that. So one of my passions.
Yeah, when you spoke to digital literacy, can you explain kind of what that means?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, there's a couple different goals, right, with education, and one of them can be to create computer programmers. That's a good goal, but I think there's just a level of digital literacy that is just as important as reading and math for getting along in the world. The joke I like to make is that growing up, I heard stop, drop, and roll about 1,000 times, but I have yet to be lit on fire, right? So I'm good, and at the times that I've wanted to know something about a computer, or that people encounter frustrating experiences with technology, is practically every day. So I really want that to become part of the required curriculum.
Yeah, there's so many life skills that would be great to get in that. Around getting a credit card, around buying a house, around personal finance.
Yep, I can totally agree.
So a couple quarantine questions. Any books that you've read during this time, or any shows that you've been watching?
I have been victim to the classic, Netflix series and things like that. For me, it's been more about the networking than any particular book or series. Just really having that empathy for what people are experiencing right now, both in your direct reports and cascading that modeling around, as we've talked about, like trying to quarantine myself in this room to have a podcast, looking, being able to stop what you're doing at work and model that behavior of like talking to your children and taking time out in the day to continue their education and get them outside and, doing all the things that, a whole person does. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
My daughter and I have been watching Saved by the Bell. It's been a big hit. It's still funny.
Pretty good. It's really good. I love it.
Well, hey, Janice, I appreciate you joining the show, kind of sharing a little bit about your life, a bit about your company, which, again, I'm excited about, and I think has really big potential over the coming years. But thanks again. I look forward to sharing this one.
Thanks so much, Ryan.